Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be exploring something, you hear about it all the time, but we're really going to go deep on it today. Electronic health records.
EHRs.
EHRs, yeah, in medical education.
Yeah,
And, you probably know EHRs from your own doctor visits, but have you ever thought about how they shape the way doctors learn?
it's
We're
true.
going to unpack all that today.
What's fascinating is there's so much more than just digital filing cabinets.
Right.
They have this profound impact on how medical students and residents are trained,
Yeah,
and that ultimately affects the kind of care we all receive.
absolutely.
So it's a big deal.
It is a big deal. And we've got three really insightful sources for this deep dive.
Okay.
One is a research study that kind of dives into the different ways EHRs are portrayed in the medical education literature.
Mm.
And then we've also got two opinion pieces from clinicians and educators who have some pretty strong opinions about how these systems are shaping the next generation of doctors.
And those opinions are where things get interesting.
Oh.
You'll see some surprising tension and even conflict in how people view the role of EHRs in medical education.
Okay, so let's just dive right in. This research study, which we'll link in the show notes,
Okay.
found that there are three main ways EHRs are talked about. They
Yeah.
call these discourses,
Mhm.
and each one reveals a different set of priorities and values when it comes to training doctors.
Yeah, the first discourse frames the EHR as a skill.
That's a skill. Okay.
So it's all about mastering those practical aspects of using the system just like you'd master using a stethoscope or performing a physical exam.
Right.
Think about things like navigating screens efficiently, positioning the computer so you can maintain eye contact with the patient, and just generally integrating the technology seamlessly into the flow of patient care.
So it's about maintaining that human connection even in the digital age.
That's it.
Yeah, that makes sense. But then we've got the EHR as a system.
Right.
What's that all about?
The EHR as system discourse emphasizes the interconnected nature of these records. It's about understanding how data flows between different parts of the healthcare system, hospitals, clinics, pharmacies, insurance companies, you name it.
Yeah.
This perspective is all about efficiency, standardization, and using data to improve the overall functioning of the system.
Okay.
Think about things like templates, tracking metrics, and ensuring that everyone is using the system in a consistent way.
So with the skill discourse, the focus is on the individual doctor and patient.
Right.
But with the system discourse, it sounds like the focus shifts to the bigger picture, right?
That's right. And that shift in focus can create some tension,
Uh-huh.
which we'll explore in a bit.
Okay.
But first, we've got one more discourse to unpack.
Okay.
EHR as cognition.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting to me.
Yeah.
So we're saying EHRs can actually change the way doctors think?
Think about it this way. The way information is presented in an EHR,
Okay.
the prompts and alerts that pop up,
Uh-huh.
the types of data that are emphasized,
Yeah.
all of that shapes how a doctor approaches a patient's case. Some argue that EHRs can influence clinical reasoning, impact how doctors interpret information, and even introduce new forms of bias.
Wow, you're right. That is fascinating. It's almost like EHRs are becoming part of the doctor's thought process.
Right.
To bring this back to our listener, think about your own experiences with technology.
Okay.
Has using GPS changed your sense of direction?
Yeah.
Or has relying on spell check affected your spelling skills?
Yeah.
These are just everyday examples of how technology can shape our thinking.
Uh-huh.
Now imagine that playing out in the high-stakes world of healthcare.
Exactly.
It's kind of scary.
And what's really intriguing is that each of these discourses, skill, system, and cognition,
Right.
has different implications for who holds power in healthcare.
Okay, so tell me more about that. Who are the winners and losers when it comes to these different perspectives on EHRs?
Well, if you see the EHR primarily as a skill,
Mm-hmm.
you're likely to prioritize the needs of the doctors and patients who are directly involved in the clinical encounter. This view emphasizes the importance of traditional medical skills and that doctor-patient relationship.
So it's about empowering doctors to use EHRs in a way that enhances their ability to care for patients.
Yeah.
But what about the system view? Who benefits when the focus is on efficiency and data flow?
In that case, you might see a shift in power towards administrators,
Mm-hmm.
data scientists, and those who manage the larger healthcare system.
Right.
The priority becomes optimizing the system as a whole,
Right.
sometimes at the expense of individual patient needs or preferences.
Mm-hmm.
This is where some clinicians start to worry about the EHR becoming a tool of bureaucracy rather than a tool for patient care.
Yeah, I can see how that could create some real tension.
Yeah.
It's almost like a tug of war between those who want to prioritize the individual patient experience
Right.
and those who are focused on the bigger picture of healthcare delivery.
And then you have the cognition discourse, which adds a whole other layer of complexity to this power dynamic.
What do you mean?
Well, if EHRs are shaping how doctors think, who's responsible for designing and implementing these systems?
Yeah.
Who decides which prompts and alerts doctors see or how information is displayed?
Right.
And how do we ensure that these systems are promoting good clinical judgment rather than introducing bias or leading doctors down the wrong path?
Whoa, that's a lot to consider. So it's not just about doctors learning to use a new piece of software.
It's bigger than that.
It's about technology potentially changing the very nature of medical practice.
Yeah.
This is heavy stuff.
It is, and it gets even more complicated when you start to think about the role of EHR companies in all of this.
Oh, gosh.
They have a huge influence on how these systems are designed and implemented.
Right.
And as EHRs become more sophisticated, especially with the integration of artificial intelligence,
Right.
these questions about power and control are only going to become more urgent.
It's almost like we're entering uncharted territory here.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've laid out these three main discourses and hinted at some of the potential conflicts. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think it's time to explore some specific examples of how these competing forces are playing out in the real world of medical training.
Okay.
And that's where things really start to get interesting. So stay with us.
Welcome back. We're continuing our deep dive into EHRs and medical education, and honestly, this is way more interesting than I thought it would be.
I know, right? We've been talking about how these systems are portrayed in medical education as a skill, a system, and even as a form of cognition.
And you mentioned that each perspective has different implications for who holds power in the world of healthcare.
Right?
Can we unpack that a little more? It feels like there's some real drama brewing here.
Definitely. Let's think back to those three discourses: skill, system, and cognition.
Yeah.
If you prioritize skill, you're likely to side with the people on the front lines of patient care, the doctors and the patients themselves.
Okay.
It's about maintaining those traditional medical skills: observation communication, the ability to connect with a patient on a human level.
It's about the art of medicine as much as the science, right? That gut feeling a doctor gets when something isn't quite right, even if the data looks normal.
Exactly. And that's where some people worry that the system discourse, with its emphasis on efficiency and standardization, might miss the nuances of individual cases. If you're too focused on following protocols and checking boxes, could you miss something crucial about a patient's unique situation?
Let's say a doctor is feeling pressured to see more patients in a day.
Right.
That pressure often comes from administrators who are focused on efficiency and keeping costs down.
Right.
Could that pressure to be efficient actually end up harming patients if doctors don't have enough time to really listen and think critically?
That's a key concern, and it gets even more complicated when you bring in the cognition discourse.
Okay.
If EHRs are shaping the way doctors think, are they guiding them toward the best possible decisions for each patient? Or are they nudging them towards certain pathways that might not be the most appropriate?
That's a scary thought.
It is.
It makes you wonder who's really in control, the doctor or the software.
And that control isn't just about the technology itself. It's also about who has the power to shape that technology.
Right.
Think about the companies that develop and sell EHR systems.
Okay.
They have a huge influence on how these systems are designed, what features they prioritize, and how information is presented to doctors.
This is starting to feel like one of those conspiracy theory movies where a powerful corporation controls everything from behind the scenes.
Well, maybe not quite that dramatic.
Okay.
But the point is that there are real power dynamics at play here.
Right.
And it's not just about companies. It's also about government regulations, insurance company policies, and even hospital administrators who all have a say in how EHRs are implemented and used.
So it's not just a simple matter of good technology versus bad technology.
No.
It's about understanding all the different forces that are shaping how these systems are used
Exactly.
and who benefits from those uses.
Precisely. And that brings us back to the winners and losers question.
But
The way we design and implement EHRs has the potential to either empower doctors and patients
right.
or to shift power away from them and towards other stakeholders.
Okay, so let's talk about those potential losers a bit more.
Sure.
Who are the people or groups who might be disadvantaged by the way EHRs are currently being used?
One group that often gets overlooked in these discussions are the patients themselves.
Really?
In theory, EHRs are supposed to improve patient care by making information more accessible and coordinated,
Right.
but in practice, they can sometimes create barriers between doctors and patients.
I've definitely experienced that myself.
Yeah.
It's frustrating when you feel like your doctor is more focused on the computer screen than on you. Like
Mhm.
you were saying earlier, it makes you feel like just another data point in the system.
Exactly, and that's where the skill discourse becomes so important.
Hmm.
It's about reminding doctors that EHRs are tools to be used in the service of patient care, not the other way around.
It's about using technology to enhance the doctor-patient relationship, not to replace it.
Right. And it's also about recognizing that patients have their own expertise and perspectives that should be valued.
Yeah.
Sometimes the information that's most important to a patient isn't captured in the structured data fields of an EHR.
Right.
It's in the nuances of their story, their fears and concerns, their hopes for the future.
So we need to make sure that EHRs don't silence those patient voices.
Exactly.
Doctors need to be skilled in using these systems in a way that keeps the patient at the center of the conversation.
Absolutely. And another group that might be disadvantaged by certain approaches to EHRs are medical students and residents,
Yeah.
the doctors of tomorrow.
How so? Aren't EHRs supposed to make their lives easier by providing access to all this information?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
On the one hand, EHRs can be incredibly helpful for learning.
Mm-hmm.
They provide access to vast amounts of data, allow students to track patients over time, and offer decision support tools that can help them learn best practices.
So it's like having a library and a team of expert consultants at your fingertips.
In a way, yes. But the way EHRs are implemented can also create challenges for learning.
Oh.
For example, if students are constantly being monitored and evaluated on their efficiency,
Yeah.
they might be less likely to take the time to research a question or explore different approaches to a problem.
So they might be more focused on getting through the tasks quickly than on actually learning and developing their clinical reasoning skills.
Exactly, and that's where the cognition discourse becomes so crucial.
Okay.
If we want EHRs to support deep learning, we need to design them in a way that encourages exploration, critical thinking, and even a healthy dose of trial and error.
I'm starting to realize that this is about so much more than just learning how to use a new piece of software.
Right.
It's about how we shape the future of medicine.
That's a great way to put it.
Wow.
The choices we make about how we design, implement, and use EHRs will have a profound impact on the kind of doctors we train and the kind of healthcare system we create.
So where do we go from here? How do we ensure that EHRs are used in a way that benefits everyone, not just a select few?
That's a great question, and it's one that we'll explore in our final segment.
Okay.
We'll look at some specific examples of how these competing forces are playing out in the real world.
Okay.
And we'll leave you with some thought-provoking questions to ponder as you navigate this complex landscape. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been talking about how electronic health records, or EHRs, are impacting medical education. And
It's been quite a journey.
it has been. We've gone deep into these competing narratives.
Yeah.
EHR as skill system and cognition, and
Yeah, each one
each one pulling the future of healthcare in different directions.
different directions. It's true.
It feels like things are coming to a head.
Yeah.
We've talked about these tensions in theory, but can we get into some like real world examples? Like how
Sure.
are these different views actually clashing in hospitals and medical schools?
One of the most striking examples is the use of copy pasting.
Copy pasting.
Okay. It's incredibly common for doctors to copy and paste chunks of text from previous notes or templates to save time.
Yeah, makes sense. Doctors are busy. It seemed like a simple shortcut, but what's the problem with that?
Well, on the surface, it seems harmless,
Mhm.
but if you think about it from the skill perspective,
Right.
there's this worry that copying and pasting can lead to a sort of autopilot mentality.
Okay.
Instead of carefully crafting each note, doctors might just be going through the motions,
Uh-huh.
potentially missing important details.
So it's like they're not fully engaging with the patient's information, which could lead to mistakes or misdiagnoses.
Exactly. And one of our sources, a clinician named Gagliardi,
Okay.
found that doctors who heavily relied on copy and pasting often had a more superficial understanding of their patients' conditions.
That's unsettling.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if those time-saving shortcuts are actually worth it.
Right. And the problem goes even deeper when you consider the cognition discourse.
Mhm.
If doctors are constantly copying and pasting, are they really developing the critical thinking skills they need to make sound clinical judgments?
It's like relying on spell check all the time.
Exactly.
You might get the spelling right, but you're not actually improving your own spelling skills.
That's a great analogy. And in medicine, the stakes are much higher than a misspelled word.
Yeah.
A missed detail or a superficial understanding of a patient's case could have serious consequences.
This reminds me of something we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
The tension between efficiency and thoughtful care.
Right.
It feels like copy pasting is a perfect example of that tension playing out in the real world.
Absolutely. And this same tension arises with the use of note templates,
Note templates.
those pre-filled sections in EHRs that are supposed to standardize documentation and save time.
Right. From the system viewpoint, they'd probably seem like a dream come true, efficient, consistent, and perfect for data analysis.
Yeah.
But I bet the skill folks have some reservations.
They do. Their concern is that templates can lead to a one-size-fits-all approach to patient care, squeezing unique individuals into standardized boxes.
Right.
Remember, the skill perspective emphasizes the art of medicine, the ability to tailor care to each patient's unique story and needs.
So a template might miss those crucial details that make each patient different.
Exactly. And a study cited in our research actually found that while templates could be helpful for basic tasks,
Okay.
they sometimes led medical students to develop a sort of tunnel vision,
Okay.
focusing on filling in the blanks rather than exploring the nuances of a case.
It sounds like those templates can be a crutch, preventing students from developing their own diagnostic muscles.
That's the fear, and remember the cognition perspective.
Yeah.
There's a worry that if students become too reliant on these predetermined pathways, they might not develop the flexible, adaptable thinking that's essential for good doctoring.
This really makes you think about the purpose of medical education. Is it about churning out doctors who can efficiently navigate a standardized system?
Right.
Or is it about cultivating doctors who can think critically, solve complex problems, and truly connect with their patients?
Those are the million-dollar questions.
Yeah.
And honestly, there are no easy answers.
Right.
But the key takeaway here is that EHRs are not neutral tools.
Right.
They embody values and priorities, and the way we design and implement them will have a profound impact on the future of healthcare.
This deep dive has been eye-opening.
I agree.
We've covered so much from the theoretical frameworks to real-world examples,
We did, yeah.
and it feels like we've only scratched the surface.
That's the beauty of a deep dive, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about sparking curiosity, not necessarily providing all the answers.
So for our listener, what's the most important thing to take away from all of this?
I think it's about awareness. Be aware that EHRs, while powerful tools, are not a magic bullet. They come with their own set of challenges and potential downsides as you interact with the healthcare system. Be mindful how technology is being used, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
That's such great advice. Ask questions, be informed, and advocate for the kind of healthcare experience you want and deserve.
Exactly.
And for anyone who wants to learn more, we'll link to all the sources we discussed in the show notes.
This has been a fascinating conversation. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
And thanks to you, our listener, for diving in with us. Until next time, keep exploring.